lot more. But please welcome from Pittsburgh, my friend Vince Palamara.
Normally, good afternoon. Normally, I kind of wing it up here, show like a farrago of audio visuals, and kind of go from there. In fact, that's the way I've been doing it off and on for 20-some years. This time I decided to stick with the script because I want to make sure I didn't forget anything. Just want to say from the outset, it might be hard to believe, but I'm actually a very big admirer of the Secret Service. I don't cast aspersions on them as an agency. A lot of good, brave, dedicated men and women. In fact, ironically, a week from now, my wife and I, we couldn't make it, but we were invited to the home of Robert DeProspero, who was the head of Reagan's detail for several years after Jerry Parr, and a couple other pretty famous agents. We're going to be there. Joe Petros, an author. So, and even despite my criticism, some of the agents are fans, but well, it's here and there. So begin here. My talk is Action Through Inaction, the real story of the Kennedy detail, the agents assigned to President Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. Okay. Imagine this stunning scenario. President Kennedy survives Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. There's no Vietnam War as we know it today, no ground troops, merely 1,000 advisors as the low-key conflict grinds to a halt and fades away like a poor man's Korean conflict at best. In turn, imagine no civil unrest, no drug culture, no prolonged Cold War, no J. Edgar Hoover reigning for another decade, no 1968 Democratic National Convention violence, the Vietnam War. There is no real reason to protest the government now, is there? With JFK alive to fulfill a second term, there's no LBJ presidency, no Nixon revival, and thus no Watergate, the other historical event like the assassination and Vietnam War that tore the country apart and created decades of mistrust in government. There's no Ford presidency, there's no Nixon, no Ford. Thus, there's no reason for a protest Carter vote. President Reagan's through Trump may or may not have ever happened. I'm not saying it would have been utopia. It would not have been. I'm not saying President Kennedy was a god, a saint, or an unflawed man. Clearly was not. What I am saying is this. If the Secret Service would have done their usual, thorough 1963 era standard job, President Kennedy survives Dallas and probably doesn't even become wounded in an attempted attack. So the next time someone says, oh, come on now, it's over 50 years, new century, post 9/11, what does it all matter now? Tell them no Vietnam War, no Watergate, the large mistrust in government probably never would have reached the levels it has today, or at least as soon. The Cold War would have ended long ago, and perhaps, the need to keep the military-industrial war machine going would have led to a heavy hand in the Middle East. That would have happened, and all the inherent problems that have arisen from it, 9/11, the war on terror, draining of our economy, etc. So the real domino theory came to fruition. With the death of JFK, several presidencies were spawned that never would have happened. Again, at least LBJ through Carter at a minimum. And the respect and trust in government would have been felt for a far longer time. The scars from the JFK assassination truly are with us today. Keep in mind, President Kennedy was our last assassinated president, and only 10 presidents ago. In the big scheme of things, with new best-selling books and audiovisual reminders plentiful on the internet and shared by millions, that's not ancient history. Okay. As for myself, my interest in President Kennedy, the Secret Service, and the Kennedy assassination in general began at the age of 12 in 1978, coinciding with both the House Select Committee reinvestigation of the assassination and reruns of the classic fictional television series about the Secret Service of the 19th century, The Wild Wild West. Coupled with two parents who still today are rabid Kennedy fans and you have the most interested son in myself. My original research truly took off shortly after 1988, the 25th anniversary of the assassination. I started to key on the Secret Service, especially in comparison to the assassination attempt on President Reagan on March 30th, 1981. I said to myself, theories about the mafia, the CIA, and other possible culprits are all fascinating, but what did the Secret Service agents do to try to prevent the assassination? Why was the assassination a success? In 1991, I should say, at the age of 25, I made my first major presentation at Jerry Rose's Third Decade Conference in Fredonia, New York. And if I do say so myself, amazed an audience of 60 older authors and researchers, many of whom admitted they really didn't pay the Secret Service any mind. As Robert Groden told a friend of mine, I guess that's why they call the Secret Service secret, and they were really proud about it. I was the first to popularize the fact that the driver of JFK's limousine, Bill Greer, turned around not once but twice during the shooting, slowing the limousine down to a near stop, disobeyed common sense, training in a direct order from the superior, fellow agent Roy Kellerman, to get out of line of fire. It was chiefly responsible for the success of the assassination. Okay. And so, it's the sequence of events. And like I said, Greer was chiefly responsible for the success of the assassination, no matter who was the shooter and no matter who was behind the murder. The reaction from the audience, which included authors Harrison Livingstone, George Michael Ivica, and Bob Cutler, among others, made me realize that I was onto something. With their encouragement and inspiration, I went further than mere photo and film analysis and secondary sources. In short, my goal was to do something unique, attempt to interview and or correspond with every former agent and surviving family member I could find. From 1991 until the present time, that is what I have done. I am now the author of 4 books, one soon to be released, forthcoming sometime later, on both the Secret Service and the assassination. I have a major part in both Part 7 of The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and that's from 2003, which was a major rating success and popular DVD. I only just mention that because it reached a lot of people. And the recently released DVD and Blu-ray called The Coup in Camelot. I've appeared in over 120 authors' books, so on and so forth. Now, here's the thing. I've interviewed and corresponded with over 80 former agents, White House aides, and sundry other important people, far more than the Warren Commission, the House Select Committee, and the ARB combined. In fact, I'm in the ARB's final report, and the board was inspired by me to go interview a couple of important former agents. But enough about my background. This is all labor, love, and a commitment to truth and history. I have a life and a job. Not in this for the money, folks. Far from it. So what's the bottom line from all my research and hard work? What is the bottom line here? Here it is. Again, when I said beginning. President Kennedy should have survived, Dallas, and the Secret Service agents truly are the men who killed Kennedy. No, there was no agency plot, per se, and many of these men, the vast majority, were merely following orders or at most were negligent. I have 3. Just 3 major suspects who I feel crossed the line into, at the least, gross negligence, and at most, actual participants in aiding the success of the assassination. Now, we'll get to them in a moment. I mean, sure, there are a very small handful of other agents I'm suspicious of regarding the assassination of the cover-up, but again, we're talking a very small number here. Other parties were the shooters, masterminds, and power brokers. What the agency provided was action through inaction. No pulling of triggers or firing of bullets, but allowing those triggers and bullets to act in an unimpeded fashion. All it takes is a few precious seconds, folks, and we had both a dead president as well as a dead president who cannot defend himself against claims that he brought it on himself. The old blaming the victim mythology, I'll also get to that in a moment. So from about 1991 to 2005, I worked hard on my research part-time as I pursued both a working career and other interests. However, 2005 was a watershed moment. Via a tip from former agent Lynn Meredith, I was able to obtain the unlisted address and number of former agent Clint Hill, a very reclusive man who, up to that time, testified to the Warren Commission, but not the HSC or the ARB, spoke to author William Manchester, but no other author, and other than an iconic 60 Minutes interview and a couple Secret Service television programs, pretty much became what I call the Howard Hughes of the Secret Service. Again, reclusive and never granting private researchers and authors any interviews. After all, as I said, he had an unlisted address and phone number, and if you notice, he only spoke to official bodies and spotted pretty much official history. Just name, rank, and serial number, and a few other notions. That was pretty much it. Then came my 22-page registered, signed receipt, required letter to Hill, summarizing my work up to that point, basically saying that the agents were handicapped that fateful day in Dallas because a couple senior agents laid down the law through actions and words that hampered the agents' abilities to do their jobs, while at the same time falsely blaming JFK for these so-called handicaps. In addition to all the other former agents I spoke to, I also contacted former agent Gerald Blaine. This will become important momentarily. In a nutshell, one of my major discoveries was the fact that despite official mythology, President Kennedy did not order the agent's office limousine, nor did he order the agents to do anything else. This I learned via many interviews and correspondence with dozens of actual former agents and White House aides who would most certainly know firsthand. This isn't authors or theorists. These are actual people that knew President Kennedy, spoke to him, etc., etc. The list includes the head of the White House detail, Gerald Bain, different Gerald Blaine, Bain, B-E-H-N. His top assistant, Floyd Boring, one of the 3 shift leaders, Art Godfrey, the driver of the fog car in Dallas, Tampa, and many other trips to Kinney, JFK's good friend and aide, Dave Powers, and many more. This was all a huge surprise to me. Although I focused on Secret Service negligence, I more or less reluctantly bought the JFK as scapegoat myth from roughly 1988 until September 27th, 1992. You might think, September 27th, 1992, what's that? That's when I spoke to the #1 agent, the aforementioned Gerald Bain, who demolished this notion in no uncertain terms. It was a stunning call. I spoke to him, and he was a real nice gentleman. And I just took it on faith that, I read William Lynch's book. I guess President Kennedy ordered the agents off the back of the car in Tampa 4 days for Dallas. He goes, I don't remember Kennedy ever saying anything about not having agents on the back of the car. He didn't order them around me. I always kind of wish I was an attorney. He was like, okay, calm down. It's exciting, but could it just be an old man? Well, it was his mid-70s, very lucid. Could it just be, memory merge? He's confused. Advent of age, although he was very powerful, very adamant with me. And that's when it was like they were reading cue cards all across the country, all independent of each other. A little old unknown me at the time. Keep in mind, early 90s for the internet, so they don't know me as a blog or anything. I had no book, couple conspiracy articles, but come on, basically, who's Vince Palamara? So they were just talking to me, telling me nonchalantly. A lot of them actually said, oh, well, it was Oswald, he acted alone, but at the same time they'd say, no, President Kennedy he didn't order the bubble top off, he didn't order him about that car. Very nice man, never interfered with our actions at all. That's where this all began for me, and in different respect. I went from just being interested in a certain level to this took it to a whole new level, new ball game. But back to the matter at hand. Like I said, I include the self-addressed stamped envelope with my bold letter to Clint Hill, encouraging him to contact me with comment. It was a pipe dream, I knew, but hey, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Having heard nothing from him, I decided to call him, and boy was he livid. The conversation was short, sweet, and awkward. Hill denied receiving my letter, although I was staring at the sign of receipt. And then after an equally awkward pause, wherein I asked him if he was still on the other line, he ended the conversation with, yes, I am still here. I just have no interest in talking to you. Ouch. Through happenstance, I spoke to the aforementioned Gerald Blaine, again, different from Gerald Bain, the next day, and he shocked me by bringing up my private letter to Hill and quoting from a segment of it. Like I sent him just a snail mail, like, how's he know about it? Turns out the 2 long-retired men were dear friends for decades, since the 1950s, having served in the Denver field office for a while before the White House detail. And in fact, Blaine just attended Clint Hill's son's wedding, along with fellow former agent Bill Livingood. We talked about him earlier. The former Sergeant at Arms for the House of Representatives, who you're actually all familiar with. If you watch any of the State of the Union addresses for Presidents Clinton, Bush, or Obama from about 1995 to 2012, he was the man who shouted, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. So the last living active agent, I should say, became the Speaker of the House, or the Sergeant of Arms for the Speaker of the House of the U.S. Representatives. Small world indeed. And yes, I've also spoken to correspondent with Mr. Livingood previously, but again, I digress. So the bottom line from all that, they're still very good friends for decades. Blaine's sharing my private letter over the phone, and I'm like, private letter to Hill. I'm like, how did you know about this? And they're like, oh wow, they've been friends, they're sharing each other. This will become important in a moment. So up to this time, my first book was a self-published affair. And although I was stunned by these developments regarding Hill and Blaine, I thought that was basically it. I would have my blogs and appearances in other books, but other people's books, but to spread the word. But I thought at the time it was basically the end of the road. What can I do with it? Boy, was I wrong. In late 2009, I received word from Gerald Blaine, of all people, yes, him, Clint Hill's a good friend who I spoke to, and who quoted from my Hill letter, that he was coming out with a book about the Kennedy detail, which turned out to be the title of the book, The Kennedy Detail. It went from initially being just a small publishing house affair into a huge Simon & Schuster release with all the inherent huge publicity machine. No mean feat for first time obscure agent turned author. I then received a letter from Gerald Blaine's attorney, get this now, asking me to take down my one blog where I mentioned his upcoming book. They thought I was trying to say I was the co-author of the book. Anyone who read it with common sense would say, Gerald Blaine, former agent who protected Kennedy's, come with a book called The Kennedy Detail. I think it was a shot across the bow, to be honest with you. They threatened me with obtaining a court order to remove my little blog, so I decided to let them have their way for the moment. But why little old, a big old? Me, why me? And why Blaine, a very obscure agent who was on the Texas trip and not the Dallas stop, that next to no one had ever heard of? Why indeed? No sooner could I digest all these bizarre, out-of-the-blue happenings than I found out that Clint Hill, yes, him, the reclusive agent with the unlisted address and number I boldly sent that alarming letter to, he was writing the foreword to Blaine's book, as well as contributing to its contents, appearing on the Inherent Media Blitz, MSNBC, Fox, you name it, and also appearing in the Kennedy Detail television documentary. So these two men, one famous, one obscure, were long retired and had no compunction to write a book, let alone appear in public again. So what gives? In fact, Sam Kinney proudly told me, all of us old-timers would never sell out or write a book for any amount of money. I am talking Clint Hill, me, and all my buddies. This is the old school, no kiss and tell. So it's very bizarre. So in the interest of time, here, read my first book and see my online CTKA review of Blaine's book, as well as all my other reviews at CTKA regarding Hill and Blaine's books. So no delusions of grandeur here. It was definitely my 22-page letter to Hill that awakened the sleeping giant, so to speak. And here's more evidence of that. In 2010, when Blaine's book came out, I discovered much of it was a direct response to my work, including Blaine sarcastically calling me a Secret Service expert on pages 359 and 360. Also in 2010, here's the real big event, both Blaine and Hill would appear on C-SPAN with network CEO Brian Lamb and mockingly discuss my work, even showing a YouTube video of me speaking. Little old me, old people. And why? I say why indeed. If it isn't obvious to you by now, you haven't been paying attention. Events will springboard from here. Co-author Lisa McCubbin would go on to help in the writing of the Kennedy Detail, but also all of Clint Hill's books, all three of them. And this is no TMZ tabloid tidbit here, it's just factual truth they both admit to. 84-year-old Clint Hill left his wife of 50-plus years, although they're still legally married, for 52-year-old McCubbin, also married with kids at the time. McCubbin had gone to the prom of Blaine's son years ago, but I digress. All this information is easily verifiable anybody via YouTube, and of all things, the Irish Times. Okay, so it is what it is. McCubbin lived in Qatar in the Middle East during the early millennium, was sought out by the Saudi government to help them in dealing with the Western press, no joke here, and scored an exclusive interview with George Bush, all before the age of 37. Despite her relatively young age, no spring chicken here, before you can digest all that, turns out a John McCubbin was the head of the White House police under the Secret Service in the 1920s and was from Lisa's same hometown of Falls Church, Virginia. So pretty interesting, all these connections. Definitely makes you think. So the following events occurred not long after Blaine's book came out. Hill would appear on C-SPAN with network CEO Brian Lamb again in 2012, discussing Hill's book, and right out of the blue, my wife and I over there, man, we were watching, couldn't believe it. He mentions little old me again. First book hadn't come out yet. Who's me? Who am I out of anyone? And we were decided flabbergasted. He had little old me. He has yet unpublished researcher at the time. He'll also mention on the same program that he burned all his personal notes in 2005. What? As a reaction to my letter the same year? Weird. I was then harassed at my prior place of employment from a good friend of Blaine's again, it is what it is. Yes, yeah. No paranoia. I got the guy's name. Human Resources contacted me twice about it. What it boils down to, a little side here. This gentleman is a friend of Blaine. He wrote to the head and CEO of my company at the time, PNC Bank, and said, this guy's running very unpatriotic, unflattering things about a former friend of mine, and I don't think he's the type of employee who should represent Human Resources Department. Laughed and said, this is a free country. He's not saying anything wrong. It's First Amendment right. It's nothing profane, obscene. And he said, if anything, Vince told me, you could turn the tables on him, get him in trouble for harassment. Why is he doing this? They say both letters. They actually notified him one more time. We're going to seek legal action against you. But the point is, little old me, who am I? Why are they doing this if there's nothing to all this? Okay? So again, you can thank me or curse me, take your pick. I'm responsible for both the Hill and Blaine books coming out of the woodwork. And they wrote their huge New York Times best-selling books. The biggest publishing houses in the world, say one, Simon Schuster, has garnered them all quite a bit of money, appearing on television documentaries numerous times, including the Emmy-nominated documentary they made, and sadly, reinvigorating the false debate about blaming JFK for his own death. It probably would have ended there around 2012 or 2013, but I had a big surprise for them. I obtained a publisher for my first book, Trying Day, and it was released in time for the 50th anniversary. That is when the harassment at work began. My blogs and Amazon reviews started getting hacked. In fact, all 400 and some reviews have come down at Amazon. No explanation from Amazon, by the way. And another obscure agent and dear friend of Hill and Blaine, Chuck Zaboral, would go on to write a one-star review of my book. Well, McCubbin also gave me a 1-star at Goodreads, but Blaine marking my book as to read. Again, I don't say this out of ego or nothing. I'm just saying, why the attention on me? There you go, the sequence of events. There you go. No doubt, all with the goal of suppressing what I had to say, because it's very damaging for them. It shows, I hate to use these words, but it is what it is, shows they are liars profiting on the death of a man they failed to protect. In addition, 9 agents drank the night before the assassination. Guess who one of them was? Glenn Hill, the same man who had the audacity to criticize 9 other agents who drank in Cartagena, Colombia in 2012 when another president, Obama, was scheduled to appear, and now goes around telling people who want his autographed books that he did not drink the night before, despite his official report in the Warren Commission volume saying otherwise, and his prior statements saying otherwise. But you see, President Obama lived, and he wasn't blown away like he was under your watch now, was he, Clint? No. And again, I'm sorry this is harsh, but I consider Hill a false hero. What I call the Jessica Lynch of the Secret Service. Remember Jessica Lynch during the Iraq War? He got to the limousine, this is bottom line, brass tacks. He got to the limousine when the shooting was all over and done with. He did not protect JFK, and furthermore, Jackie actually got in and out of the limousine of her own volition. They never even touched. And this isn't subjective Rorschach photo analysis you see for yourself. Hill performed the equivalent of a foul tip out in baseball or even striking out swinging. He did make an attempt to do something, albeit too late. Hill would go on to receive a medal for his attempt from LBJ for the so-called heroism. Never mind the drinking incident, which Secret Service regulations show were grounds for removal from the service. Yes, him, Paul Landis, Jack Reddy, and Glenn Bennett all in that follow-up car a few feet away from Kennedy's limousine, and 5 other agents drank hours before Kennedy got his head blown off. Alcohol consumption and sleep deprivation wreaked havoc on even the best trained reflexes. They all went to bed between 2 and 5:30 a.m. and had to report for active duty at 8 a.m. Okay? For his part, Gerald Blaine was there too, but claimed to have only drank fruit juice. He can even be believed. So right there in volume 18, you can go right to it. There's Gerald Blaine basically saying he was along with all the other agents, because there's 9 agents who admitted drinking, but there was about 14 other agents who were there. They said, we just had fruit juice at the Cellar Cafe, and some of the other agents drank at the Fort Worth Press Club, so that's about it. So, see, for me, this most certainly is not a 50-year-old murder mystery. In addition to how history was changed, how it affects us all today, you have 2 old men traveling the world, smiling widely, making very big money. The Hill book movie is allegedly in the works. You heard that right, Hill's first book. Mrs. Kennedy and Me is going to be a Hollywood movie. in peddling lies about the man they failed to protect. As a little aside, I think Clint Hill's book is very good other than a couple pages. So I'm not casting aspersions on everything they've said or done. I'm a big admirer of Clint Hill's first book other than 2 pages. I have a lot of problems with Gerald Blaine's book, Kennedy Detail. So that's where my, lack of better, where my anger is close to. And, Hill even rode in an open limousine down Elm Street in one program without breaking a sweat. So much for being traumatized by the event. In fact, I think it was an Australian version of 60 Minutes. He has a little smile on his face to go in an open limousine down Elm Street a couple years back. So there you have it. In effect, JFK was assassinated 3 times. His actual murder, character assassination regarding his private life, to which several agents held him in contempt, more on that in a moment, and this blame the victim mythology. Now, after providing you with the background, here is the foreground, the details, the nuts and bolts. Number 1 is a major discovery mine in 2 parts, which I mentioned one of them earlier. President Kennedy did not order the agents off his limousine. He didn't do it in Tampa 4 days before his death. There's 0 evidence this was even invoked for Dallas in any case, and agents on or near the rear of the limousine would have saved the president's life. The lack of agents on or near the limo was a Secret Service decision. Many times, but not all the time, and I'll get to that in a moment, agents walked, ran, or jogged near the rear of his limo and or rode on the actual rear of his limo on the handholds. Second major discovery of mine, one touched on in my first book and expanded in my next book coming out. The Secret Service is the boss of the president, not the other way around. Even if a president wanted to order the agents around, they would just ignore him. Take, for example, and I have a lot about this in my next book, you'll see actual articles and statements from former presidents, Truman, LBJ, of all people, President Clinton, dedication of Secret Service building. The Associated Press, November 15th, 1963, so that's what, 7 days before the assassination? This was shown all over the world as the Associated Press. The Secret Service can overrule even the president where his personal security is involved. Shockingly, perhaps with an eye towards real history after he was long gone, Hill admitted in 2010 in his 6-foot oral history, with Blaine right beside him, the president can tell you what he wants done, and he can tell you what certain things, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. What we used to do was always agree with the president, then we do what we felt was best anyway. Wow. Right there on video. Go to the 6th Floor Museum, check it out for yourself. Number 2, President Kennedy had nothing to do with the limiting of placement of motorcycles by his limousine, has been alleged by some. 3 to 6 motorcycles normally rode on each side of his limousine. Flanking the limousine, usually you can just right beside his car, right by him and his passenger on the side. As had been the case in the prior stops on the Texas trip, the Florida trip, and countless other trips. This was the Secret Service decision to limit their use in Dallas, something the HSCA rightfully said was uniquely insecure. Number 3. President Kennedy had nothing to do with another major discovery of mine, and get this now, the lack of security covering multi-story buildings along the parade route. It was common practice from FDR era through and including the JFK era and obviously beyond to have agents or police or a branch of the military guard and monitor buildings. Sometimes even using a helicopter to help monitor both the route and the buildings themselves. This does not mean just stationing, just having men watch the windows from passing cars, okay, or the police on the motorcade routes themselves. But stationing men physically on the rooftops themselves, as was the case in San Antonio the day before, Florida 4 days before, Nashville in May of '63, Germany in June of '63, Ireland in June of '63, and many other trips. And again, not only do I explore my first book, but my third book I actually go into more specifics with actually contemporary news articles, Secret Service documents, more Secret Service like witness statements and whatnot to back it up. And I corresponded twice with former Secret Service Chief Inspector Michael Tarina. The position of Secret Service Chief Inspector was very influential. It was Tarina himself who actually completed the Secret Service manual. So if there's one person in the world who knows Secret Service procedure, it's him. Well, he contributed to this obscure book by author Wayne Hyde, written the year before the assassination, called "What Does a Secret Service Agent Do?" It was primarily directed towards young adults, but commercially available in libraries. I got an obscure copy of it. It's plainly stated, again, help of Michael Trina working on the book, if the president is to appear in a parade, agents and policemen are assigned posts atop buildings and on the street along the parade route. This lack of coverage in Dallas is a Secret Service decision. We would learn even more from the Secret Service records of the year, except for one thing. The ARB noted in their final report from 1998, Congress passed the JFK Act of 1992. One month later, the Secret Service began its compliance efforts, I should say. However, in January 1995, the Secret Service destroyed Presidential Protection Survey reports for some of President Kennedy's trips in the fall of '63. So just think about it. January 95, okay, this is a few years after, there was actually, if you read Dr. Horn's book, Inside the ARB, they were going to have congressional hearings about it. This could be a big current event. Like, wait a minute, you destroyed Secret Service reports in the fall of '63. Secret Service, why did you do that? It was Ralph Bastian who became the director of Secret Service, became the spokesman for the Secret Service and said, look, oh, it was an error in records retention. We're very sorry. We won't destroy anymore. And how convenient. It was September, October, early November. The only ones that weren't shredded were mid-November on. And those are damaging to the Secret Service because you have the Tampa trip and some other things where it shows, oh my God, multi-story buildings were guarded. They had 18 flanking motorcycles. And I spoke to Russell Groover, who was a motorcycle officer, and he confirmed multi-story buildings were guarded. In fact, the Tampa trip was the longest domestic motorcade President Kennedy ever was on, far longer than the Dallas motorcade. In fact, only Berlin was longer. And what does Berlin and Tampa have in common? Multi-story buildings being guarded. The list goes on. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. You'll hear more about all the details, but it's a drastic contrast to Dallas, Texas in general, and Dallas in particular. Agent Sam Kinney, driver of the follow-up car, was adamant to me on 3 occasions that he was solely responsible for the bubble tops removal on November 22nd. Told me JFK had nothing to do with this. It was briefly on the car that morning. It was then removed. Although not bulletproof or bullet resistant in the traditional sense, many people thought it was, thus making it a psychological deterrent with someone even fire on the car if it was on. In addition, many agents thought it would deflect the bullet that I spoke to, or shield the president via the sun's glare off the top. And many times the top was on the car in either its full formation or the partial formation, meaning just the front and rear pieces were used so the president could stand intermittently and get some air and offer some semblance of protection. And it was similar to the famous Eisenhower bubble, where Eisenhower had the same thing where he was able to stand intermittently, but he had the back piece on in particular. In addition, the top was used in bright no-rain conditions. I find it was used on approximately 25 good weather trips of JFK. It turned out to be roughly a third of all JFK motorcades. So excluding the ones where there was no top, excluding the ones where it did rain and they used the top. In good weather conditions, we're talking roughly 25 trips. And keep in mind, JFK didn't have a motorcade every day or every week. They were pretty much a semi-special occasion. So there you go. The numbers are not that dismal for the bubble tops use. And I just offer it as a what if, in that case, why didn't they use the top, even in a partial formation? There you go. Normally a flatbed truck, sometimes two, carrying still in motion photographers for the press was used in motorcades and rode in front of the presidential limousine as it was used in the prior trip in Florida. Many other occasions, it was canceled at the last minute by the Secret Service at Love Field. There's video where the guy, it's funny, he's trying to debunk something by the Secret Service. He's actually proving them. There's video from the June '63 San Diego trip, and there's 2 live television feeds in 2 flatbed trucks in front of the presidential limousine, a gaggle of still in motion photographers as well. The Marines are guarding the route. They're facing the crowd. You see a whole bunch of Marines on each side, and there you go. But so somebody looks at that, but they posted the video, they're like, there's no agents in the back of the car explaining this. It's like, oh, you idiot. You're just showing 2 flatbed trucks with all this coverage, and you're showing the Marines on the side. So people, they focus on one thing and say, aha, but they don't see the big picture. It's not that every single trip had all these security measures invoked, because the Secret Service was a small organization back then. What they did to augment it was they had federal, state, and local officials, like that. In this case, it would be the Texas Rangers, it would be the Sheriff's Department, it would be the local police, they had the branch of the military to help augment them, and that's how they got around their so-called small number in the White House detail. And also members of the Secret Service field offices around the country helping them as well. So keep that in mind. Number 6, Special Agent in Charge Bain or his immediate assistant, number 2 man Floyd Boring, accompanied the president on trips outside of Washington. Bain took his first vacation of the JFK era, coinciding with both the Florida and Texas trips. This is confirmed to me years ago by the aforementioned Sam Kinney and, for what it's worth, Clint Hill and Gerald Blaine in their books that came out between 2010 and 2012 nonchalantly said basically it's a quirk of history. But yeah, Gerald Blaine accrued all this federal leave and used it that weekend of the Florida trip and was trying to feed the assassination. I just say to yourself, but something to think of mind. Keep in mind, from Inauguration Day through November 17th, he's on active duty and he's not around assassination occurs. It's definitely food for thought, if nothing else. So the number 2 man, Floyd Boring, manned the Florida trip, yet he was absent from the Texas trip, allowing a third stringer, Roy Kellerman, to make only his second major trip ever with JFK without either Bain or Boring. So possibility Texas was the very first, as unclear if Bain was also on part of the Nashville trip. It's hard to tell from the record. Gardner McHugh was a he was a military aide to JFK, and it looks like Bain might have been on a part of the trip. It's inconclusive. At the very least, to say, okay, it was Kellerman's second trip. I make it the equivalent of, hey, let's go to the Super Bowl. We're not going to start your starting quarterback. We'll use a third stringer instead. Makes a lot of sense. So there you go. And stark contrast between that Nashville trip, too, like I mentioned before, building rooftops were guarded, and a helicopter guarded the route. That's another thing. In addition to stationed men on, the roofs, they would also have intermittently. In fact, there's everybody's seen the DVD, National Geographic, JFK: The Final Hours, that came out for 2013. You can see actual film footage of the San Antonio motorcade. It's taken from the helicopter. There you go, the day before the assassination. Secret Service news, number 7. Secret Service knew of prior threats to JFK's life in the month of November in Chicago. That trip was canceled last minute, Chicago trip was, in Florida, so they knew about threats in those both cities. Yet the Dallas trip went forward as scheduled, despite all the warnings from Senator J. William Fulbright and others. With regard to these threats, another major discovery of mine was the existence of 2 major agency covert threat monitors on the Texas trip that they did not admit to. PRS agent Glenn Bennett, PRS is the Protective Research Section of the Secret Service. They're the guys that are kind of like the file clerks left back in Washington. They're checking like if some crazy guy from, I don't know, Philadelphia, San Antonio, where wrote a threatening letter to the president, they would investigate. Hey, there's John Jones, he lives on Main Street, let's go make sure when the president visits time, he's under wraps, or maybe he's even going to federal prison for 5 years. So, there's this guy all of a sudden, Glenn Bennett, he's riding in the follow-up car, very unusual. He joins the detail, he was temporarily assigned to the White House detail on November 10th, 1963, the day after the infamous Joseph Miltier threat was made from Florida. So November 9th, Joseph Miltier makes that famous threat. He's men who killed Kennedy, and read many books that, the way to get Kennedy would be to shoot him from an office building with a high-powered rifle. Next day, Glenn Bennett is made a temporary agent of the White House detail, starts riding in follow-up cars, and it gets even better or worse, depending on your perspective from there. He lied under oath to the House Select Committee, saying he was not on the Florida trip. Now, keep in mind, all these records only came out in the late 90s. When they came out in the late 90s, they say, okay, Glenn Bennett, he's telling the House Select Committee he was not on the Florida trip. Uh-oh, Secret Service records came out, several of them, it's a slam dunk. Every single trip. JFK visited Cape Canaveral, Miami, Tampa, and Palm Beach. And Glenn Bennett was on all those trips riding in the follow-up car. And also, a obscure Secret Service book came out identifying who Agent Bennett was, what he looked like. Lo and behold, you can now identify Glenn Bennett in the films and say, wow, Glenn Bennett was riding on the back of the car in Tampa, and he was riding in the follow-up car, and not there, and not admitting his presence while he was there. Well, before you can even digest that, turns out there was another PRS agent on the Texas trip, Howard K. Norton. He was on the Austin trip. Again, late 1990s, the Austin Secret Service survey report came out, written by, I think it was Art Godfrey was the shift leader. And on there it says that after the assassination, they all boarded the C-130 and headed back to Washington. And one of the men they mentioned was Howard Norton. And that's all came about. I'm not familiar with Howard Norton. So I spoke to a gentleman named by Dale Wonderland, who's a fellow PRS agent. Oh yeah, Howard K. Norton. He was the first security technician of the Secret Service. In fact, he found the residence cavity in the Russian ambassador's, the seal that they were trying to bug his office. Went, oh yeah, Howard K. Norton, he was one of a kind, blah, blah, blah. The point being is, why were these guys there? Why was nothing said about it officially after the fact? And again, I think it was definitely, there was some sort of covert monitor of threats. In other words, the Secret Service knew of threats to the president's life, and he's assassinated in Dallas. And they can't admit to why they were there in their roles. It was covered up because even in naive 63, 64, heads were going to roll. They realized, wait, you knew of mortal threats to the president. You even had a monitor on the trip right in the fog car, and he was still assassinated. And there's more to it than that, but that in and of itself would have raised the eyebrows of many, John Q. citizen, but they didn't know about it at the time. It's only because these records were released in the late 1990s, little old me was even curious. Well, a minute. Why is he lying about the floor trip? Howard K. Norton, who's that? And there you go. It's all just flippant. So you can speak to another agent. Oh yeah, Howard K. Norton. He was a security technician. Sure. That's how it all comes about. And very interesting, intriguing response. When I started to ask fellow agents about Glenn Bennett and Howard K. Norton, they all got instant amnesia. They're all saying, I don't know if I remember him after all. I don't know what he was doing on the trip, like Gerald Blaine, author of Kennedy Detail. It was strange why he was on the Dallas trip, but I have no idea why he was there. I spoke to Jerry O'Rourke, a fellow Texas trip agent, and he said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I'm afraid for my agency. And the man hung up on me. Yeah. There you go. You might think, oh, it's 50 plus years later, it's time to move on. And yet, there you go. And then it's incredible. Here he was, 2005 on the phone to me. And in fact, it was prefaced remark by Jerry O'Rourke. Real nice guy. Spoke to me, roll, this comfortable thing. Hey, Vince, you have any questions? Give me another call, man. I know you're busy right now. And I called back. That's why I mentioned about Glenn Bennett and Norton. I don't want to do it. I'm afraid for my agency. Click. Pretty bizarre. Bennett passed away in 1994, and Norton's current whereabouts were unknown. I contacted the Secret Service, and get this, after a check of records, the public affairs officer, George Rogers, said they couldn't even tell me how long he served in the agency. Howard Norton. This is in addition to the presence or lack thereof of military intelligence operatives in Dealey Plaza, including as well-known James Powell, who took a photo of the Texas School Depository after the shooting, even though he was allegedly off duty. There you go. And wrapped in some reason. Special Agent in Charge Bain confirmed to me that the route was changed for the Dallas trip. Another amazing explosive thing happened September 27, 1992. He gave me no details, but he said, I know it was changed, but why? I've forgotten completely. I don't know. So, for years, people were contesting about a route change in Dallas. He goes, oh, that's conspiracy folklore. That route wasn't changed. It was etched in stone. It was going to Maine to Houston now. Well, here's Gerald Bain, who's head of the White House detail, telling a total stranger on the phone. The preface of it was, I asked about his House Committee executive session testimony, which wasn't, in fact, I don't think it still hasn't even come out. So yeah, the House Committee asked me about the route, and I know it was changed, but why? I forgot completely, I don't know. There's more to it than that. You can see that, I think, chapter 5 in my first book. Go more about the route than that. But again, it's Secret Service responsibility. They're not, unknown people on the grassy knoll. It's not the mafia, and all due respect to other people's theories. Again, these are just people, I think, on a certain level, unfortunately or intentionally, whatever, made the assassination possible with action, through inaction. So again, if they would have been going Main Street to Industrial Boulevard, for example, a route that Sam Kinney, when Lawson admitted to me was an alternate route, they would have been moving at a faster rate of speed away from the book depository in Grassy Knoll. And that was the route that FDR took in 1936. I have some photos of the motorcade route. And you see good old FDR going straight down Main Street, hey! And Governor Connolly admitted that was the ceremonial route for the Warren Commission. Number 10, as most people are aware, Sheriff Bill Decker ordered his men not to participate in security in the motorcade. It was verified by Roger Craig. Decker had said this after agreeing to offer security to Secret Service Agent Forrest Sorrells the previous day. He offered him 15 agents, but then there was, Roger Craig saying on film, saying, yeah, we were told by Sheriff Decker to in no way participate in the security of that motorcade. We were there as spectators, nothing more. They're pretty crazy. You might say, so, oh, okay, Sheriff's Department, what about that? It was standard procedure. Again, the agents were short-handed. They relied on local police and military to help them out. Godfrey McHugh, the aforementioned military agent I mentioned, said he was told for the first time ever to not ride in the presidential limousine. Who told him not to ride there? Secret Service. We should be surprised by now. He said that normally he rode between the driver and the senior agent in the front seat, observing and taking notes. In conjunction with the above, Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry and Dallas Chief of Homicide Will Fritz each wanted a car full of policemen in the motorcade, and the request for Nick's buy, you guessed it, the Secret Service. And not only did they originally agree to the presence of the motorcade, there was a precedent for their uses of either local police or sheriff's departments cars armed with, heavily guarded, heavily armed men. They went to Pittsburgh in October of '62. There's articles where they had all the rooftops guarded, and the local police department said that they were watching any window. If any window was open, they knew what to do. So this is also indication of electric. People thought electric was talking hyperbole. Oh, come on, that's one trip. I don't know this was used all the time. Turns out it was, but it took someone to investigate it. There you go. And in addition to the 9 agents who drank before, JFK, the president, and LBJ, the vice president, were in slow-moving open cars for the first time ever in a motorcade in Dallas. That's such a horrible breach of security. Yet there are two sitting ducks, as it were. As we all know, the presence of fake or unauthorized Secret Service agents at Dealey Plaza. Were they real? Were they unauthorized? Were they agents from a field office? Who knows? Another major discovery of mine. One of two main drivers of JFK's limousine, Secret Service agent Tom Shipman, passed away suddenly of an alleged heart attack at, of all places, Camp David on October 14, 1963. So this man died before the assassination of a heart attack at Camp David. And again, I explored this more. I have a whole chapter in my next book. I spoke to family members of the late Shipman. And don't do it way, but I'll tell you. They said that he was quickly buried, and he was urged to be buried quickly. There was no toxicology reports. It was like a country doctor. Heart attack, there you go. 2 days later, he's buried. He's a fit Secret Service agent. In fact, he said his widow was surprised he just passed his annual physical, and he's dead of a heart attack. And what does that mean? Thomas Shipman was one of the two main drivers. Sam Kinney was an auxiliary driver who usually drove the fall car. Well, Bill Greer is left to drive JFK in Dallas. Getting right to Bill Greer, as I mentioned sort of earlier. Bill Greer, the shooting begins. He looks back not once, but twice. He looks back once. Roy Kellerman, his superior, says, "Get out of line, we've been hit." And Roy Kellerman grabs a reading microphone. That's when Bill Greer disobeys the direct order and common sense training and turns back around, staring at Kennedy until the fatal headshot makes its mark. He turns forward, hits the gas. He denies all this to the Warren Commission. Okay, even though you can see it's a Bruder film, he does this. And there you go. So you got success of the assassination. People like Jerome Posner and Vince Bugliosi said if Bill Greer, we would have hit the gas. There you go. History would have been averted. Bill Greer is one of my suspects. I have 3 of them in the time. 4 agents are on. We'll read the questions real quick to add what David said. It's very important, but as a witness. Yeah. Okay. What Dennis was saying, he was at the morgue. He was an eyewitness. It's in Bill Law's book in the footnote. He said the 2 Secret Service he passed said after today, we won't have to feel like pimps anymore. Well, I got to add this too, and I'll make it very quick. 4 agents spoke to Seymour Hersh in 1997. It was actually on a Peter Jennings show, The Dark Side of Camelot. And they're talking about the anger disgusted President Kennedy for his private life. There's no way for the president to act. I was angered by it, to be honest with you. I'm married, and I don't do this stuff. I think, what's going on? He's hooking up with prostitutes and whatnot. Again, action through an action, just a few seconds, let it happen. It's definitely food for thought. If these guys tell us anger, one of them is Tim McIntyre, one of the agents of the Fog car, who was talking about, well, I feel like a procurer of prostitutes. I don't think JFK would have been around for a second term. He probably would have been impeached over all this. And Emory Roberts died in 1973, one of my suspects. Tim McIntyre told Seymour Hersh on the said, yeah, Emory Roberts, he used to joke about it, I laughed a lot about it. He said, don't tell your wife, don't tell anybody. Emory Roberts was very concerned about President Kennedy's private life. Very concerned. Let a couple seconds pass, order some agents back. Hey, I'm your appointment secretary now, Mr. President. Thank you.
I doubt if any of those guys were a higher moral authority.
I know. Well, yeah, they definitely partied. I mean, Ed Klein's kind of dubious sort, there's some other people, but yeah, they definitely Secret Service partied on the road too. Yeah.
You mentioned in a book, I believe, that one of the nurses at Parkland said that they brought in a Secret Service agent who was shot during a rout. I forgot what the explanation was there.
Oh, yeah, my second book, JFK Parkland, does I go through a lot of testimony, and yeah, it's one of those things where it could just be a mistake in reporting, but supposedly they're saying that, in addition to the President, Governor Connolly, Secret Service agents was shot and killed in the motorcade. Some reports said he was just injured, and some people like David Lifton offer the very interesting speculation. At that time, the murder of the President was not a federal crime, but the murder of a Secret Service agent was a federal crime. Would that have been a way to induce federal jurisdiction over the case, even temporarily, to get the body onto Air Force One in the casket, maybe do some manipulations, who knows? But the bottom line is, officially speaking, there was no agent who was killed that day. But all the networks and in the newspapers, actually. Assistant Secret Service Treasury Secretary Robert Wallace said no agent was hurt in the motorcade today. He did not flatly say anyone was killed or anywhere away from the attack. He just said no one was hurt in the motorcade today. It's kind of a weird way. Why would just flatly say no one died today? That was a wrong report. So, yeah.
Hi, Vince. Vince and I go back about 30 years. I recruited him for the Men Who Killed Kennedy series. I'm sure I'm responsible for his being here to some degree. In the beginning of The Guilty Men, I make the comment, you can't kill the president unless the next president, the head of the FBI, and the head of the Secret Service are in on the cover-up. And it's the work of Fred Newcomb and a few others, but very few of us realized that the Secret Service was important, and I'm proud to be on the ground floor with Vince. And I urge you, there are certain books that are really important to read, and Survivor's Guilt is really one of the core books to read about this case. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. And like I want to say, I always tell people this. This is not a witch hunt. I have a lot of admiration for the Secret Service. Okay, we're only talking 3 suspects. Men and women today are wonderful, and like I said, even though he knows about my work, Robert DeProspero, Thanksgiving dinner with Robert DeProspero, and he has my book where I'm saying all this stuff, so he doesn't hold it against me, so there you go.
Hey, Vince. I think I'm going to add a little bit to the idea of the Secret Service agent shot. There were guys opposing the Secret Service agents. And if you take a look at an obscure little deposition, can't cite the volume or page number, but it's in with the Parkland Hospital depositions. Bertha Lozano.
Yeah, oh yes, I know that.
Yeah, so guys brought in by 2 other guys.
Again, they called him weirdly a Mr. X. She calls him a Mr. X. He's not identified. Was bleeding, and he had some sort of hemorrhage or something. And yeah, there's nothing. Let's put it this way. My first reaction would be what probably was some sort of mistake. It was a convenient mistake to induce this federal jurisdiction. But there's definitely Bertha Lozano. There's another one from Parkland. It's in the J.C. Price exhibits where another nurse talks about some sort of bleeding patient and whatnot, in addition to the President, Governor Connolly.
Okay,
So it's food for thought.
On the side somewhere?
There was blood up by the stairwell that was...
Oh, the pool blood in on Elm Street.
So,
Yeah.
where there were fake Secret Service agents. So, there's that. There's Bertha Lozano. I met her cousin, who lives in Austin, and got the story of what happened after that. She was kidnapped and disappeared shortly after she witnessed that as the nurse at the ER registration. She reappeared a year later, nude on a beach in Florida, with her memory completely wiped. And she never. In recent years, her memory has started coming back in fragments, but the family doesn't want to deal with it. They don't want to talk about it. So I've passed this lead on to a few people who are writing books.
We'll definitely.
But I thought I would just add that to that whole scenario. Yeah. So she saw something she wasn't supposed to see, and they erased her memory.
So it's strange, yeah. Wow.
I think we're out of time, actually.
Okay. All right. Hey, thanks a lot, everybody.